Can Democrats please stop gaslighting themselves and just pretending that Biden winning in 2024 is some kind of foregone conclusion? I voted for Biden in 2020, and assuming that he's the nominee in 2024, I'll vote for him again. But I'm not going to pretend like Biden versus Trump is just in the bag for Democrats. And I think it's ridiculous that so much of the Democratic establishment and so much of left-leaning media is pretending like this is a non-issue when 69% of Democrats think that Biden's age is a problem when it comes to another term, when Trump is leading Biden in the average of polling, and Biden needs to win the popular vote by 4 to 5% to actually win the electoral college, when Democrats are stupidly pushing this idea of Bidenomics. Let's be clear, the economy has been improving since Biden took office. Let's also be clear, a lot of those improvements are not felt by average Americans. When you get on TV and you start touting that the annual inflation rate has gone down, that does not mean anything. That doesn't mean anything to people that are seeing higher gas prices and higher grocery prices. This is so out of touch with how the average person interacts with the economy because inflation is cumulative, meaning that if we were on track to have 2% inflation one year, 2% inflation the next year, 2% inflation the third year, and instead we had 2% inflation, then 8%, then 6%, but oh guys, now we're back down to 3. That 8% and that 6% increase don't just like disappear when the most recent inflation rate is low. And if anything, when you rely on this kind of technocratic messaging, when the country is not in a great place, it strengthens the populist sentiment and leads to the kind of dissatisfaction you're seeing right now. I'm not trying to say that Biden is responsible for the inflation, but when you're an incumbent president, the current state of the country is kind of your responsibility, at least in the eyes of the voters. And if people are going to buy groceries and they're going to buy gas and they're still paying a lot more than they feel like they've ever had to pay in recent memory, then it shouldn't be a shock to you that they're going to express dissatisfaction with the establishment or whoever's currently in power. Literally the exact same thing applied to Donald Trump in his 2020 re-election. I would argue that if COVID never came along, Trump would have likely won re-election against Biden, because if the economy was still doing well, whether or not that has anything to do with Trump's performance as president, people are going to attribute at least some of that to whoever is in power. It's unfortunate for Biden because I think he has had a lot of positive policy accomplishments when it comes to labor unions, manufacturing of semiconductors, capping certain prescription drug prices. There's a laundry list of things that I think are good policy when it comes to the Biden administration. But I think it's also important to be honest and say that a lot of these things are insufficient when the metric for success is the present state of the country. Biden's net approval rating has been negative since he pulled out of Afghanistan. And this is significant because leading up to that point, it wasn't a huge swath of time, but still, he was pretty consistently net positive. And since then, he has consistently been under 50%. When he's really lucky, he's in the mid 40s, but some polling shows him all the way as low as the high 30s. So I don't think it's crazy to say that some chunk of people who at one point supported Biden have now become at least a little more skeptical of him. And I'm tired of hearing this argument from people that think Biden should run again, that, oh, it doesn't matter if most Democrats think he's too old and if his approval rating is lower, because when push comes to shove, people that voted for him last time, they're not going to switch to Trump all of a sudden. People that are Democrats aren't just going to switch their party allegiance. But that's not how elections work. Elections are about who actually turns out to vote. And if enough people are uninspired by Biden's age and unhappy enough with the current state of the economy that they just can't be bothered to take a day off of work and go vote, and actually the scale isn't even that large, this is like 10,000, 20,000 people in some swing states, the election goes to Trump. Not to mention some of the changes we've seen since 2020 when it comes to the demographics of the average Republican voter. Trump has made gains amongst Hispanic voters and black voters. There's reason to believe, and this is maybe more so anecdotal, so I'm not going to state this as a matter of fact, although I do think I've seen it enough to sort of think that something's going on. Younger people are less skeptical of Trump than they used to be. And I think it's just a short-sighted strategy for Democrats to say, well, oh, Trump is facing multiple indictments, so that's just so bad, no matter what kind of dissatisfaction currently exists with the status quo, we're just going to rely on, like, Trump is under investigation, Republicans want to take away your access to abortion. Again, both of which are true, both of which I agree with, both of which are reasons I'm going to vote for the Democratic nominee in 2024, but both of which I don't know are going to be enough in this kind of situation. And I don't understand why are Democrats insisting on trying this strategy. Do you know what would be so much better, and if anything would just be a massive benefit to the Democrats? If Biden gives an address to the nation and says, my fellow Americans, it's become very clear to me that my age is a problem. I want to be graceful. I want to step down right now when I feel like I'm leaving a good legacy behind. These are all of my accomplishments. This is all of the progress we've made. I'm going to be passing the torch, not to Kamala. We're going to have a Democratic primary, even if we have to completely restructure it and do it in a shorter span of time. This is all wishful thinking, but like, it's not impossible. This can be done if the Democrats and if Biden want to do it. And I think it would do nothing but good for them. I fail to see what the downside would be. Biden steps down with grace, acknowledging his flaws, trying to stand on the good things he's done, and saying that like, this is emblematic of me hearing the American people and responding to what they want. It makes Biden look good. It makes Democrats look good. It puts them in a stronger position in terms of a candidate who is inspiring, maybe younger, maybe. Voters actually respond very well to a candidate who is willing to call out their own party, because at least optically, it makes people think this guy has principles. Even when his own team does something wrong, he's gonna call them out for it. And it's just not a good look when your entire party is falling in line behind you and refusing to honestly engage with criticisms that mean something to voters. It honestly doesn't mean much to me that Biden is old, because I recognize a lot of what a president does is appointing members of the cabinet, appointing Supreme Court justices, and then signing legislation where all they're doing is, writing down a signature, but a lot of the heavy lifting is being done by Congress and the Senate. But this is the issue. This is why populism exists. This is what Trump was able to exploit. Technocratic messaging about inflation rates and legislation that was passed. If it doesn't mean anything in the lives of the average voter, it's not going to translate the way you think it is when it comes to election day. That's not to say people won't care or they won't take it into account, but I would argue gas prices and grocery prices and how people are feeling about the current state of their lives means a lot more than like the CHIPS Act. And when the guy running against Biden is likely going to be a guy who's going to be able to get up on stage and say, remember how low gas prices were when I was in office? Remember how great the economy was doing when I was in office? Remember those checks I sent all you guys in the mail? Again, I'm not a fan of Trump. Look at my channel. I posted a video talking about the indictments and why I think Trump is kind of screwed. I think he's a threat to democracy. I don't agree with a lot of his policies, but I think you have to be able to think like this and understand Biden is not in some super strong position going into 2024. I'm not a political strategist. I'm like 21 years old. What do I know? I'm sure the Democratic Party has a very good reason for not doing any of these things, other than just, this has never been done before. We want to stick to the norms. We don't know what's going to happen, because if that's the only reason they're not doing this, that is so stupid. This is one thing I think both political parties need to realize. America is in a very unique position right now. With social media, access to technology, deepening political divides, the same type of messaging doesn't work in the same way. If there was ever a time to think outside of the box, to challenge conventions and norms, and to do something new, now is literally the best time to do that, because we are being given every indication that we are at some kind of turning point when it comes to how politics works in this country. Policy is not what wins you an election. Narrative is what wins you an election. Framing, messaging, telling the story of what's happened over your presidency or what's going to happen if you're elected. Pointing at numbers and talking about all of these concepts that people do not care about, regardless of how true they are, is not going to help you when people are worried about paying their bills and they're not inspired by the man who's president. Because if Democrats actually believe, like I do, that Trump is an existential threat to this country when it comes to institutions, norms, and the functioning of our democracy, why would you take a risk in this election? What is the point? Why would you not want a decisive victory? You can't have a winning strategy if you're not honest with yourself.